Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
Or a fever otherwise.
Well, you know, that is the wonderful thing. Just imagine what it would be like if we actually had some of the medical technology and medical understanding of Star Trek. Because, I mean, you have that sense and you have everything there. Would the pandemic right now even be an issue?
I would say it depends. On the main worlds, in places like the main starships, etc., I don't think so. But then when you have the outskirt worlds, where maybe, say, they're 2 months away from any main vessels, etc., there might be a newly settled agriculture world that's been, terraformed not too long ago.
But if they have the communications, then they can actually get the knowledge and get like an update to not be as far behind. I mean, there is that conceivability to it. And hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Yes, we decided to just have a bit of a better, more interesting start because of the conversation that was happening off air. And, you know, everyone loves a good segue. And wait a minute. Who the hell let Paul Blart in? Fuck! So, we have a returning guest, a regular appearance, and we have a new guest to the panel this week. And yes, we are talking in a more lighthearted, what is it that you enjoy about Star Trek? Why do you love the franchise, or do you just like the franchise? It's just a... Let's be honest, we're still going to give it shit every now and then, but we're mainly going to be talking about what we actually like about it and why we don't hate the franchise. Now, of course, I'm talking pre-2016, but that's another story for another time. So, the newest guest... Which name would you like to go by on the panel for this one, good sir?
Just Crew is fine.
That's what I wanted to make sure of. So we got King Crew with us. We got the mischievous Muttley, which oh boy, have we got a story for everyone if they missed it in the Discord server on Wednesday. And hopefully in a recovery phase, we have Thoughts by Jay Brown with us, so if he's quiet for a longer stretch of time, it's understandable. Bones is doing his best.
I wish Bones was here doing his best. Although, if I go with the Kelvin timeline, Bones, I might end up with an allergic reaction to something.
You know what? If you end up with numb tongue, just remember, he does have something for that.
Yes.
Yes, but I figured with everything going on, let's be honest, we're getting into probably the most aggravating time of the year, especially when it comes to family requirements, so we're not gonna bog everyone down with a doom and gloom. I mean, the year has already been enough of that already, so let's just go ahead and nerd out and talk about it and actually get some enjoyment out of this for fucking once. And you know, I'll go ahead and kick it off. I was actually thinking about this on the drive home after helping the mother-in-law take care of some things at her place. And when it comes down to it, there is one core aspect of Star Trek that will always be on the top of my list for what it is that drew me into the franchise and has kept me there since I started watching it back in, 85? And that's the technology, the actual intellectual progression of humanity and what in the show they have been able to achieve. And the fact that the humanity that we are a part of here in the real world, we are just as capable, if not more so. We have an untapped reservoir of potential that is just there waiting, is just there wanting to help bring everything along and be that shining example of what humanity truly can do, not just from a mental exercise aspect, but an actual, we can do better, people. We can work together. We can actually fix a lot of the issues that are ailing us as a species right now. We just have to collectively pull our heads out of our ass. And as everyone saw, yep, we got another wonderful addition. Welcome back again, Dapper Dino. How's everything going on your end today?
Things are going fairly well here. This is going to be my second Star Trek stream of 3 today, oddly enough. I was already on my channel with some expert-level Klingon speakers for letting my audience ask them questions. And now I'm here. And of course, my favorite thing about Star Trek is the explosions and lens flares. Oh, and the running. Lots of running.
Don't forget the shaky cam. Got to go with the shaky cam if you're going that way, too.
Yes, that is, I think, really, it's the only reason to watch Star Trek. It's not like there are, themes about humanity, politics, morality, the human will. None of that. Laser beams go boom.
Well, let's go ahead and keep going around. You know what? Let's keep a clockwise direction going from my vantage point. And let's go with the fresh meat on the panel. Crew, what is it that actually... let's hear your story when it comes to your growth around the Star Trek franchise. Giggity.
I've always been a Picard fan. But the new series just kind of ticks me off a little bit. No, back in the 80s, the 90s, yeah, man, Star Trek did it for me. But now I'm a Star Wars fan all the way. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
See? Laser beam go boom. That's what I've been
Exactly.
saying the whole time.
Yeah. It's the lightsabers that did it for me, actually.
Of the Star Trek franchise,
Mm-hmm.
what is your favorite aspect of it? Is it the technology? Is it the storytelling? Like, what part of it really held on to you for this long as a fan?
The technology, for sure. Absolutely. Just the warp drives, the ability to go through space, to teleport. Why can't we teleport yet? What the fuck?
Well, because there are pretty big technical problems with that whole, moving directly from one location to the other without passing the intervening space. Because, at classical scales, objects have a hard time doing that. And you can say, oh, but I'm just a collection of non-classical particles. Like, well, true. But the chances of all of them being going instantly from one place to another, resulting in you as a macro object going entirely from one place to the other intact, very, very, very small. And so there's no great way to increase the chances there.
Yeah, the teleporter really is just a glorified suicide box.
Yeah, there is that philosophical question. If you are ripped apart into your, composite particles, normally you would consider that being killed. And then if those composite particles are then rebuilt into a person, is that you? Maybe. It'll certainly think it's you. But yeah, does everyone who gets into a transporter die every time they do it?
Well, there have been conflicting explanations of what actually goes on there. Like, there is the prevailing explanation that it is essentially a beefed up replicator that is actually meant to also deal with consciousness and intelligence. So that's why when you are transported from one spot to another, you're still a functional living being. You don't just go brain dead. Well, okay, sometimes you go brain dead, but they have medical technology to deal with that and fix that. But it's still that you're broken down locally on the transporter pad. The information, the actual encoded data, is then streamed to the location that you are to materialize in. And this is where the difference comes in. Either your individual particles were relocated, or they, at the other end of the beam, local particles are broken down and reorganized to create an exact duplicate of you with your intelligence then imprinted onto it.
Interesting.
So there is that bit of, guess you could call it ambiguity or discrepancy between the actual mechanics of how the transporter works in that regard. Is it actually breaking down your body and your personhood down to every subatomic particle that is you, and then relocating that? Or is it using ship stores of energy and matter and relocating it and reconstituting with what it needs on location? Or is it purely using particles that are at the location to create what is you?
No, from what I understand is the reason why they're able to go to teleport stuff through light speed is because it's at an atomic level. When Spock was able to teleport from the planet to the ship going warp speed, I don't think they can do that replicating. I think that would be on an atomic level.
Unfortunately, guys, it turns out that I actually can't stay. Something has come up. So I wanted to say a little bit more seriously that I think Star Trek has always, well, maybe until recently in some cases, been a good vehicle for telling stories that are about something. There's an anecdote that I think encapsulates this. It was when the episode where Q has been turned into a mortal as punishment by the Q Continuum happened on Next Generation. And the original writers had the idea that Q was just going to pretend to be human, and it would be a funny little thing where, you get some laughs out of Q pretending to be human for, 30 minutes, whatever, and then the last 15 you find out, oh, no, it's a joke. And Gene Roddenberry said, okay, but what's the story about? And the writing team said, well, it's a funny Q story. He's like, well, that's a description of the story. What is it actually about? What's the theme? What are we trying to talk about? And they realized that what would be a better episode is if the Q actually lost his powers and actually became mortal, and he had to deal with the limitations of being a mortal, essentially non-magical being. And what happens when a god-like entity is stripped of his powers? How does he cope with it? And I think the best episodes of Star Trek are about something. Like, say, the famous episode of Damar we've talked about before. It's about trying to be understood, so much so that you're willing to take great risks just for the hope that you can actually reach out and contact other people and be understood. Because the alien race had been isolated because of their strange language for such a long time, despite being a spacefaring race. So, yeah, I think that is the best thing about Star Trek, is that when it's at its best, its episodes are about something. And I think that its worst episodes are the ones that aren't about anything. And I think that is currently a bit of a problem in a lot of newer Star Trek, including a lot of the most recent movies, like Nemesis. What was Nemesis about? It was about a mean guy. That was basically it. Whereas some of the best Star Trek movies, like Wrath of Khan, what is that about? It's about revenge and sacrifice and a crew willing to, or needing to basically make the toughest sacrifices possible just for the chance for any of them to survive. And then, yeah. So that is what I think is both the greatest about Trek and when Trek is at its greatest is when you know what the episode is about by the end of it. And there's an actual answer. And the answer isn't just a description of the plot. So, but that is unfortunately it for me. I gotta get going. So I will talk to all of you guys later. I hope that my 2 cents was useful.
Oh, completely enjoyed it, and I understand where you're coming from. So go take care of what you need to, and we will hear from you later, Dapper.
All right. If you guys are interested, 8 p.m. Eastern on Top Hats Off, I will be doing Star Trek House of Torque. It's our Klingon game. You can come see me and my friends pretend to be Klingons doing stuff in space.
And things.
Yes, things and stuff. All right. Bye.
And I do have to agree with Dapper there. That storytelling aspect, that morality play without it being overbearing or browbeating, really is something that is a hallmark of true classic Trek, in my opinion, in my view of it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. That's they've lacked with that storytelling in recent movies, but I mean they can come back.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for them to do one with the Borg.
And there's always room for improvement. There's always an opportunity to correct the mistakes of your past. And that is actually a theme that has come up a number of times across the Trek franchise. It's that no one is truly irredeemable when you actually get down to it. Like, even... let's take Wrath of Khan. The character of Khan, as portrayed in the original series and then carried over into Star Trek II, we're not talking about Into Darkness. No, it's separate story for a different time.
Yep.
Where when you look at the classical Khan as portrayed by Ricardo Montalban, you have arguably the most sadistic and evil person that they could come up with. And even that person warranted enough mercy and opportunity to continue living that instead of pushing him out of an airlock at the end of the episode Space Seed, or towards the end of it, what did Kirk do? Put Khan and his people on an uninhabited, survivable planet. Gave them a chance to actually live and continue breathing, as opposed to just completely ending the threat right there. It actually takes a person of very strong moral and ethical fiber to be faced with that sort of person who is trying to kill you and take over your ship, but rather than stoop to that level, no, that's not how we do things. Here, you are here now where you have a chance to live and survive, but be a threat to no one but yourself.
Yeah.
But but as Bullionator just said, yeah, look how it worked out. and that's part of the beauty of Star Trek II and the way the movie was. You have that continuation so many years down the road, and no one in Starfleet knew what happened in the SETI Alpha system with SETI Alpha 5 and SETI Alpha 6. They pretty much forgot about Khan, so you do have some fallibility from Starfleet there. So even with Khan being as bad of a person as he is, you still have a little bit of sympathy for him, because it was kind of fucked up to be just left and forgotten like that, whether intentional or by accident.
True.
And
no, that takes a lot of character to do that. I mean, I don't know if I could do that personally. I'm just a guy that has mad anger issues. So for me, yeah, I'll probably stoop to his level and go for the death kill. Yeah, that's just me though.
See, and I would actually have to err on the side of Kirk. I don't think I would go through with it.
Really? Some guy tries to kill you and take over your ship, and you would say, "Nah, it's cool. Go live on this planet." You can honestly say that.
Even though I am ex-military, I do not condone the taking of a life that is unwarranted. If the only option available to subdue the threat is terminating the threat completely, then okay. But as long as there's another opportunity, it needs to be considered. That's my own morality and the way I look at things.
But no, it's saying that. Would you not then consider they would say you let them go be in peace? Would you not then be concerned that they would come back with more backup?
But they're being left on a planet with no way to leave the planet.
Well, let's say it wasn't the planet. It was that you took them. Yeah, well, I guess you're right on that.
See, and that's the thing is, I wouldn't give them a ship. I would not give them the means and just set them off to roam around space as he so chooses. No. We're going to limit the threat potential as much as possible without giving that death penalty, which could very well be justified. I am not denying that. Terminating Khan's life in the episode Space Seed would not have been a unjustified action by Kirk. But what is it about Trek? What is it about humanity within the Star Trek universe that is one of the core tenets? We're not barbarians like we used to be.
Yes, no, that's true.
So, by going that route and sparing Khan's life, they do stick with that sort of consistency, which, again, I find admirable. It is a mindset that I have held to for a very long time, that no unnecessary or undue harm, especially debilitating or ending harm, should be done.
I can see that.
So, and what were you about to say, Leon?
I have no clue anymore.
Sorry.
It's all right. Well, what would you have done with Khan?
At that moment in time, with him being the threat that he was, I can't honestly say that I would be able to let him live. I would not have been able to see him and see the kind of damage and destruction that he's able to wreak just by the smallest means, and let him do something which could then harm millions more.
I have to say, I agree with that. Yeah.
Because to me, it's like Khan is a weapon. He's not really a person per se in the way that he's acting. He's a weapon. He destroys things. If I were to have, or if there were to be a group of people who had a nuke and they were running around with this nuke, all of a sudden the group of people is neutralized and I have access to the nuke. Do I make sure that this nuke is disarmed, completely disabled, taken apart, and sent away so it can't be reassembled again? Or do I find a cave somewhere where I put it, where someone could potentially find it again and, use it for other things?
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
That is a good analogy and a good comparison of seeing Khan in his potential in that sort of manner.
Yeah, because Khan, or rather, with the characters of Star Trek, you have characters that are, say, you have the Changelings, you have the Vorta, the Jem'Hadar. Those are three species which I can't really say deserve death just on their own. The Changelings have a certain society where they have a superiority complex, but they're not necessarily evil per se. The Vorta just obey the Changelings, and the Jem'Hadar, no matter how destructive they are, were made to be that, and they are kept in check by both the Changelings and the Vorta in order to make sure that they keep killing. Neither of them, I would say, deserve the same treatment that Khan would deserve in this case. Because to Khan, it's not so much that he is... It's not a cultural thing for him. It's not something where he has grown up in this kind of thing, learned from that, and he can unlearn it later. This is who he is. He is a weapon of mass destruction in and of himself, especially along with his other crew.
Well, I would almost say that Khan has taken it to a personal level where he not only is the embodiment of that sort of threat, but enjoys it and is self-aware enough that he knows actually what he is, but justifies it in his own ways to continue doing so and have that, and to keep trying to fulfill that hunger, that thirst for power and domination that he has. Now, here's something to consider, though. Say that Khan is terminated at the end of Space Seed. What do you do with MacGyvers? The historian who is a member of your crew, who became a collaborator with Khan, knowing full well what his history and his ultimate endgame would have been. What do you do with her?
I would say give her a chance. Because even if you know something like that, there's still a chance that you're not actually fully in that kind of mental capacity to understand that what you're doing, what this person is doing, is wrong. She went along with it.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're with an evil son of a bitch, you're going to stay an evil son of a bitch. If you're going to destroy Khan, destroy everything that's linked to him. That would include her.
But in that case, you won't get to know later on either exactly why she did it.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have that kind of baseline in order to go for if you meet that again.
Well, here's a comparison between those two. It would be like killing the Joker and get rid of the Joker, but then incarcerating Harley Quinn and trying to figure out what was it about Khan that drew her to him and kept that relationship going. I can kind of see that. I can kind of see that from a research psychology standpoint.
Yeah, because one of the main things about Trek, and despite, well, had I been there, I would have either vented him or, made sure that he was a spot on the wall. Regardless of that, it's something where they are still, as mentioned, not barbarians. If she has something which meant that she was not actually in proper control of her faculties, even knowing what he was, knowing what he did, knowing what he was capable of, she should still have a chance to not be erased. She should have a chance to be able to be studied and potentially helped. Maybe even being able to help others who are in situations like her.
But why?
Because
why not
if you can
eradicate everything?
because if you can find out why, in that case, you can find out how to stop it from happening in the future. Because there will be another Khan. There will be more extremely power-hungry people and fanboys and girls. There will always be the charismatic leader who manages to bring someone who you think they're very level-headed and actually critical or think critically about what they're doing. But they will still bring those people with them.
Would it be more important to let her live and tell her story? Or would you think it'd be more important to send a message to everyone else that say there is another Khan that rises up? Would it not then be more important to say, the last guy that messed with you, you eradicated everything about that person, even the helpers, all of them? Would they not try and stay away? Do you think they would try and attack again?
But in that case,
I think to eradicate their entire line sends a strong message.
Yeah, but at the same time, if I eradicate everything related to him, I just make sure that the next kinds of people who do the same thing hide it better. It won't be as easy to find it next time. I won't really know why they do it or the reasoning.
See, and that's where I am leaning towards Leon on this one, because when you think about a lot of the spotty parts of the history of the U.S., would we want to whitewash that and just think everything is sunshine and roses? Or would we want to have an actual honest, reflective look on just this one nation's problems and growing pains and mistakes that it's made along the way? Because if you erase those mistakes from history, are you ever able to really learn from them?
No, but I look at it as going back to the United States. When Japan attacked the US, we dropped 2 nukes on Japan and never heard a peep from them ever again. Other people have tried to mess with the US, and again, we just almost wiped them out. Which, to me, instead of saying, hey, we'll kill these people, but not these people, so we can learn from them and can, do this and that, I'm saying, why not make it to the point where if they kill one person, you wipe out a village. If they take out a village, you take out their entire country. You make it so that the thought of going against that, whether it be the United States or whatever, fearful. That's what I would do.
That's when you become the barbarian and you start seeing threats where there are none. Because if someone slights you, say that you have one extremist person or even someone with schizophrenia thinking that one of your people is, let's even say, they think that one of your people is the father who used to beat them, and they kill that one person. All of a sudden, you're bombing their entire village, wiping them out. What kind of message does that send?
Going down this train of thought, I do find it fascinating, and I wonder, Crew, how familiar with the God Emperor are you?
Not very, unfortunately.
I think you might enjoy the realm of Warhammer 40k quite a bit, especially the lore side of it, because that thinking of that escalation of retaliation is actually something that some of the Primarchs might actually think that you're not going far enough on.
Sweet Jesus. Okay.
There might also be a bit of a difference in it, but, well, if you have a regular human in, say, Star Trek, and they join Khan, or they join his ideals, they won't really be able to do much about it. If that happens in Warhammer, that could destroy an entire system and start another crusade. There's a difference in proportion to the risk about it, or risk of it.
There is, but as long as you keep, the ones that are important happy, like for example your people, and you're doing good things, we make sure that anyone else wants to rise up against you, will do it in fear. If that makes sense.
But in that case, define rise up against.
Well, so let's stick within the Star Trek universe, and here's a comparison that I can see actually going in Crew's favor on this. Let's look at the relationship between the Federation and the Klingon Empire. They were chilly at best at the beginning. But the way the Federation was growing, the Klingon Empire was threatened by that and actually saw them as enough of a threat to warrant violent action against to save their own sovereignty. And so you end up with the 4 Years' War. And following the 4 Years' War, because Starfleet was able to put up enough of a fight to at one point be at a standstill and then actually start beating the Klingons, they were like, okay, you aren't the weak enemy that we thought you were. And so, okay, peace, truce, no more outright full-on hostilities. And that's when we get the original series era, where they're not outright attacking each other, but they are maneuvering against each other. And then you have the disaster of Praxis exploding, as shown at the beginning of Star Trek VI, Undiscovered Country. With that radical event happening and posing another threat, a different type of threat to the Klingon Empire, they then reevaluated the relationship with the Federation and ended up becoming friends. And actually allies. Very strong allies at one point. So you do have that bit of change. You do have that melding of the interactions that in a more strict, you punch me, I'm going to knock you out, and that constant escalation, you really wouldn't have gotten there. At some point, some measure of compassion and restraint has to come into play in order for that sort of dynamic to emerge from a once hostile relationship.
That only works if you find a common ground or even a common enemy. If you guys, like, say me and AT are at war with each other, and I make it to the point where I take up all his resources and I destroy his entire village, his entire whatever, gone. The next AC2 that wants to rise up will think twice before coming up against me. And yes, that will work for maybe a couple of years. But that's a couple of years that everyone gets to live in peace. That's the way I see it.
Oh, but is it... And from that, you actually end up getting into a different aspect of the coin. And you get into how effective of a governance are the people going to be under at that point. Because people rise up against governance that they see as unjust, cruel, or otherwise detrimental to their own well-being. So yeah, you can have that battle, you can get to a peace, but what's actually going to be the spark to get another uprising to happen or not is actually going to be the quality and consistency and equity of your governments as the victor.
True. Yeah.
And here is the beauty of it. If you look at original classic Star Wars compared to Star Trek, these sorts of discussions, this sort of philosophical discussion and debate about a topic actually was a core of Star Trek, is analyzing the human condition through the eyes of other species, other races, other worlds. Whereas Star Wars started out as your space western, where it was a very simplified storyline, more focused on the action and the movement and the epic scale of everything. Whereas Trek was more personal, was a smaller scale on the storytelling aspect that just moved around as the ship went along through its mission. So, different ways of going about it, and I think that's something that's been brought up already a couple times. That is a big thing that the latest editions of Star Trek have lost, is that they're not doing the same sort of service towards that storytelling aspect that initially hooked people like all of us on the panel and those of us who are Star Trek fans out in the audience. They have gone away from that. They are trying to copycat other sci-fi franchises that right now are successful and using the Star Trek name just to get the go-ahead to do the project that they're working on. It's not that so much that they want to continue growing the Star Trek legacy. It's, I want to make a show. I like what that one's doing. Hey, I can get in and use the Star Trek name to have a built-in fan base and viewership to make the show I want. That is really how it's come out, and that's part of the disservice that I've seen over the last few years between Discovery and Picard. Now, I will give Lower Decks this. Their attempt at storytelling is more in line with Trek than the other two. However, if I wanted to watch Rick and Morty with more morality to it and a stronger basis of ethics to it, I would just get stoned and watch Rick and Morty. It's a better way to understand it.
Nothing wrong with that.
But Lower Decks has the Titan.
I will give Lower Decks that. Them making the USS Titan canon, especially in the aesthetics that they did, okay. You get a cookie for that one, Lower Decks. But you still have a lot to make up for. I mean, there are so many issues with some of the characters on there. It's painful. Granted, it's not as bad as a lot of the way the characters on Discovery are acting in Season 3, but that's another story for another time. Probably in, well, maybe not 2 weeks. We're looking probably 3 weeks at this point.
That's why I'm more of a warrior than a politician. I solve my issues by punching people. That's how I usually do it. But look, if someone threatens your way of life, someone comes and threatens your family, you have to take action. You can't just be political about it.
To steal a phrase from the rehashing of Star Wars, I would not be opposed to aggressive negotiations.
Yeah, okay, aggressive negotiations. I get that.
See, and that's the thing is, I wouldn't leave it all to talk. I would not play a purely diplomatic role, because you can go into a conversation with the intentions of being peacemaker and being diplomat, but in order for your words to truly have the weight and impact that they are going to have with a lot of different species and cultures out there, there's a certain weight behind it that needs to be there. And that weight generally is the ability to exert some sort of force when called upon.
Well, this is pretty much the case with all of the cultures or all the species in Star Trek too, depending on how you see them and depending on how they act. The Klingons used to have more, say, mentally apt people who used to be the judges, used to be the lawyers, negotiators, scientists, etc. But from the events in Enterprise, we learned that those professions, everything apart from the warrior caste, is getting more and more shunned. They're getting kind of shoved away as being too weak, not Klingon enough. If you were to face a Klingon from the era before that, from the era of where they had the people with minds like Gowron, maybe not at the end, but they had the mental capacity to understand that you can't just use power all the time. They would have understood a careful leverage in the form of, well, we don't have to have a truce. However, you've seen the way that we've actually been going so far. You've seen our advances. You've seen where we are right now. And you know where we'll be in 2 years. So you can choose to either be on our side or be a speck on the fucking sidewalk afterwards. With the newer Klingons, though, or the newer... I'm not going to bring up the whole Discovery shit and all that, because... no. But the Klingons that we see in, say, TNG, Voyager, in... what's it called? DS9. Yeah. With those Klingons, you would more need to be the kind of person who not only comes in, kicks the door in on your way in, but you have to grab them by the neck and knock them the fuck out before negotiations to make them understand that you are the boss here. You are the one that they should listen to.
Or maybe not necessarily the boss, but your words carry a weight that deserve to be listened to.
Yeah, they don't have the... Well, apart from Gowron again, they often do not have the thinking required in order to actually lead large groups of people. They're reactionary. They only see direct brute force. Whereas if you have something like the Romulans will accept you if you can show that you're better than them at something. But they'll accept you on the terms that they will spy on you. They will try to find out everything that you have to be able to use it against you if they have to.
So with
you
that,
have all...
Well, with that, you have an interesting ebb and flow to the Klingon culture as it's been shown on screen. Going through a chronological timescale, you have English in Enterprise, like you've already touched upon. But then you actually have a deviation in the original series to where they are, at least the Klingon commanders that we interact with, the commanders, mind you, they are a bit more that cerebral, plotting, and willing to maneuver, but will still be more than willing to take part in a fight because, well, we're Klingons. And then in TNG, you have more of that swing that was talked about in Enterprise going to further effect, where it is the warrior caste who is the upper echelon of society and the people making the decisions. And then you have that emergence of Gowron and of Worf, of your more warrior philosophers, for lack of a better term, where they are cerebral, they are thinking, but they'll kick your teeth in without thinking about, without hesitation. So you have that duality of it that is more akin to that interim period of TOS where that's how the Klingons were portrayed. Yes, we're going to scheme, we're going to think, we're going to position and strategize. We're not just going to use brute force. But by early and mid TNG is more of that brute force, of that unhindered military mindset where everything runs through the military and it's all about that might and everything that comes with it. But now in later bits, we're getting more of that back to a more balanced approach.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that you have one perfect example of the peak of it, where you could really start seeing the swing the other way again. Not just with Gowron himself, but with House of Quark. Was someone trying to sink another house using money?
Yes, using the tactics of a dirty Ferengi.
Yes. And you can see that had this been, say, 30 years prior, they would have just gone there and stabbed someone. They wouldn't have cared about money. They would have gone through every single quote-unquote honorable Klingon tactic there is, like finding someone and stabbing them in the back while someone else distracts them.
You know,
they wouldn't have cared about the money.
You know what Klingon we could probably blame a lot of this on?
Duras?
Exactly.
It's all fucking Duras' fault.
Damn that guy.
Well, so you have the earliest patriarch of the family fucking up an Enterprise and getting owned by Archer and being bitter about it. Then you have a later generation being the actual traitor, but then the family pinning it on Moog. And then the council becomes aware of it, but no. The House of Duras is too strong and too powerful. It'll cause too many issues within the Empire, so Worf accepts discommendation, only for the Klingon Civil War to happen and that be reversed, and politics are a fucking mess.
Yes, they are.
But it's interesting just seeing the way that these things are being portrayed. We have great examples from the Klingon Empire. We have some examples from the Andorian Empire, or the Andorian... What do they call it?
The Imperial Guard?
Yeah. When you look at Enterprise, and you see the stuff with Shran, you see the stuff with them trying to deal with the Vulcans, and you see how the Andorians really did not want open conflict. They wanted to be left alone, but they felt slighted by the Vulcans due to the Vulcans being somewhat underhandedly dishonest, spying on them, all that stuff.
Somewhat?
Well, they had a huge fucking station for spying on them.
Underneath a fucking monastery.
Yeah, and I can see that entire thing. I can see the way that Shran tried to keep that together in a lot of those episodes. Because he started to actually respect Archer when it turned out that Archer wasn't just the lapdog of the Vulcans. He was his own man. He was someone who they could potentially forge a bond with in a completely new species.
Yeah, and also that whole thing did lead to a new saying amongst the Andorians. Don't push the pinkskins to the thin ice. Because the Andorians recognized that potential in humanity, that, yeah, they're going to want to try to talk things out. They're going to want to try to be civil and diplomatic and peaceful. But if you put their backs up against the wall, they'll take you out.
As can also be seen in that episode of DS9, after the Dominion War has started, where Quark is talking to Nog. And he brings up, have you looked at those humans? Just look at them. And Nog doesn't really see what he's going on about. And Quark starts explaining that, yeah, these humans, are pretty much just one hot meal away from being worse than the fucking Klingons, worse than the Jem'Hadar, to going out there and cutting off ears like there's no tomorrow, just in order to get that kind of rage out. And the only thing keeping the humans back there is that we can afford to be more diplomatic, more actually giving up our own freedoms in order to be able to forge a better future. But when pushed to the brink, yeah, you might want to keep your head down.
Yet another reason why Quark is one of the most underrated characters in the franchise.
Yeah, but Quark had an understanding of how people actually worked. He used to be there when the Cardassians were there. He used to see all this shit. And he understands that no matter how cruel, no matter how evil the Cardassians were, they have nothing on the humans when push comes to shove. He understood that with the humans there, with the humans in that era of time in the Star Trek universe, they could be charitable. They could be nice. They had actually, evolved societally. Is that a word? Their society had evolved to the point where they were able to make these small sacrifices in order to better themselves, in order to show that we are not like our forefathers. We will not respond, or we will not feed violence with violence. If we can, we will try to talk it out. But we won't take it all the time. We won't take it if you try to strike us back.
Now, Rodent No Last Name does come up with a good question that I'm not sure the answer of. I would actually have to look it up. But he's asking, was it Heinlein who said negotiations is saying, nice doggy, while you reach for a rock? I don't know if it was Heinlein that said that, but the sentiment isn't wrong. And that's where you have that, in order for negotiations to be effective and withstanding, there needs to be that viable consequence if the negotiations are not adhered to after the fact. Otherwise, you have no chance at an honest and fair negotiation taking place. And let's look at the League of Nations. It failed because in the end, it was a showpiece. It was a glass battleship. It looked nice, but was so fragile and ineffective, and people started to realize it. And ultimately, we ended up getting World War II. And following that, the United Nations was actually given and actually granted measurable and enforceable power, which is why it has stood for as long as it has. It actually has weight behind the words that they are able to put out.
I found the quote here, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's Will Rogers. And to paraphrase it, it is, diplomacy frequently consists in soothingly saying, nice doggy, until you have a chance to pick up a rock.
And often the case, historically, it is. It's a way to pause and satiate things long enough for you to be in what you deem as an advantageous position.
Yeah, or in some cases even, to cool down to the point where you realize that the things that you said back then, the things that were said between the two parties, might have been things said in the heat of the moment and not actually what was meant.
Mm-hmm.
I refer to, I can't remember what episode it is of the Boondocks, where a certain moment is being described. I do not know who here has actually watched the Boondocks, but it is a heated confrontation between two parties, which comes from pretty much nowhere, where both parties are immediately going on a homicide or going into a homicidal rage. And that is also something where you can see how it works with the Klingon and the humans. The Klingons are very prone to being reactive. If they perceive a slight, even if none is intended, and even if it's misunderstood, they will react. They will kill someone who they perceive to be questioning their authority. And that's where, if you then go on the offensive, you say, they killed one of our people, now we blow up the ship. You will, no matter how you try to do it, run into the issue of escalation through trying to, first of all, get revenge, and second of all, negotiate, which they will see as a sign of weakness, unless you show that I have the biggest stick.
Yeah. And I was saying, I think it was, well, I'm trying to remember which part of Trek it actually was, where I think it was during Enterprise, where the Klingons actually warned against the Federation, and even Quark mentioned this about how invasive they could be because of words and actual language that they use. And it was actually one of the things that Discovery picked up on, the whole thing of T'Kuvma talking with all the houses saying, listen to the Federation, they are an invasive species, they are actually out to conquer, but they don't conquer with guns or with disruptors and blades. They conquer with words. Words like, we come in peace, we are here for friendship. And just the way that perception can be stoked and received from the outset really does speak volumes about the culture and the people in it, in which way they are going to react. Now, I personally think TNG actually covered it better, despite it being a Wesley episode, where Wesley was taking the entrance exams for Starfleet Academy. And one of the non-written tests was a particular alien had bumped into him and Mordok in the hallway. And Mordok and Wesley, being typical Federation citizens, were being conciliatory to the person who walked into them. But the person got belligerent. And it was then that Wesley noticed that his culture that he comes from views conciliatory words like that as a weakness, and it is insulting. Wesley noticed it, started giving the guy shit back, and it all was taken good because, oh, yeah, oh no, I know I bumped into you, and you were being a weak little bitch about it. Oh no, now you're actually being up at my level? Alright, I like you. Kind of thing.
Well, that's how we did things in the Navy. If we had a problem with someone, we'd lock someone, them in a room. They beat the crap out of each other, and whoever won bought beers. That's just how we did shit. But it's when you're talking about, one-on-one versus a country, a nation, a planet, even, you got to handle things differently. You can't be too diplomatic or too, I guess weak would be a word in trying to negotiate, but you got to make your stand. You got to make others know that you're there and you got the bigger guns.
Well, and at the same time, like I've been saying all along, that the words need to have a particular weight behind them. Let's look at our own history. Japan walked out of the League of Nations and even walked out of the negotiations of the armistice at the end of World War One. Why? Because they felt like they weren't being heard, and when you actually go back and look at it, they weren't. None of the Western powers took them seriously enough for them to actually listen. Which is why they became such the adamant aggressor that they did leading up to and into World War II.
True.
Mute Donkey does have a good question for you there, crew. Why's the winner gotta buy the beers? They won. Because when you settle an argument that way, it's not necessarily about who won. It's about getting over it and moving on.
Yeah. Yep, pretty much.
But in this case, and this is something, just heading back to our original question, what is it that the main part that keeps you with Star Trek, or the main part that makes you still love Star Trek? For me, as with most people it seems, it began with the technology. Seeing these things that are not just sci-fi, as in these are things we'll never be able to achieve, but seeing things where if we actually put effort into it, we could get there. When I grew older and started seeing more and more of the older episodes, not just, Voyager and sporadic episodes of TNG, I started seeing more and more of the things where the way that they were acting, the way that society had evolved, had gone to a point where being post-scarcity, at least in most of the places there, you were able to better yourself in any which way that you were actually willing to do. People did not seem to have any issues with, say that you wanted to, go skiing all day, just become a skiing professional. That would not be an issue. The only time that this is actually an issue, the only time that things like these are being brought up as being something negative, is when you're having an unhealthy addiction to it. Like mentioning the whole addiction, mentioning the drugs and rape guys when it came to Tasha Yar. When you had it go so far that the people were regressing to behaviors that were not positive or conductive to their own well-being. You had the removal of alcohol, pretty much replacing it with synthol, which you still had the taste. Supposedly, you still had alcohol, but without the negative effects. So, from what I understood, you can't even get drunk on it. You don't have the negative side effects of addiction. You don't have that. It's something where if you start drinking, even if you start drinking heavily, you still will not have any issues with it due to the technology that had been advanced to that point so far. I'm not even sure if you would be able to get fat properly in the Star Trek universe, considering the replicators.
Well, depends on their programming, because you do see people who are a bit not so much chunky, but definitely robust, especially when you get to the admirals, especially later in Trek.
Yeah, that's something where I can't say if that's something where that is because they have lived a lot longer than you would expect normally here and are still in service, or if it's something where that's actually the food itself. If it's the human factor doing it, or just the food.
Little bit of column A, little bit of column B. I would actually go with that, because not all food that they eat is replicated. There are some food stores where you have actual traditional organic ingredients available as well, especially if you're planet side within the Federation. So you can have a bit of dietary wiggle room on that aspect, but at the same time, we're seeing Starfleet. We are seeing in the franchise, for better or worse, we're seeing a small percentage of the actual population, even just sticking with humans. There are far more people who are citizens of Earth, citizens of the Federation, that are not a part of Starfleet, that we never see on screen. We see the odd addition of a family member of someone on the crew. But again, it's still, I'm trying to think of what family members that were not regular show participants that we see that were not at some point in Starfleet themselves. And I think Robert, Picard's brother, is one of the few, if maybe even the only one. Nope. Sisko's dad.
Yeah, he gets brought up too, and he eats, as far as I understood it there, only natural food or non-replicated food.
Rodent No Last Name caught us out. And not just Scotty on the Dyson Sphere. Look at Scotty from Star Trek 3 on.
But here's another question then, though. We've been talking about this before, Jared, about things such as ergonomic issues. You see so many examples of poor ergonomic designs in all of Trek. If it's that they've been able to eliminate all of those issues, if you get a tennis elbow, they can just fix it like that. So and that's why they don't care about the ergonomics.
So why not do that with the weight too?
Yeah, and just have it so that, okay, yeah, you've gained a pound, or you gained a couple of, or 2 or 3 pounds. What we can do is we either give you this something scene, which will make it so that your body starts shedding the fat cells. We can make it so that you get a special replicated diet that has no calories, pretty much. Or we can just go in directly and smash the fat cells and have them absorbed through the skin layer directly, with only few people actually opting out of these treatments. Say, Scotty, and that's why you don't actually see so many overweight people, apart from the admirals, in which case perhaps their bodies are not able to withstand that kind of treatment anymore, or they just give no fuck since they're not going on away missions, etc.
Well, that's always been one of my biggest questions is, even today, we have nutritionists that will take care of your obesity. We have medics. On Star Trek, I don't understand why they needed a medic. I think you wave that magic wand and you're all good. And then they have that screening thing. We don't even know the anatomy of the body. They just screen it. They do that little thingamajiggy, and you're good. But they couldn't get rid of fat cells? Really? Yeah. It makes no sense.
Now, I will give a little bit of credit on this side of it, where you still want a diversity of your crew, of the cast of the show, because even in the future, you're still, as they've put it, you're still going to have certain genetic factors to worry about. I mean, they tried eugenics. They tried filtering through the genetic profile of humanity as a whole, and it kind of didn't go so well.
Except we can do that now. Sort of.
But again, keep in mind, that's how we got Khan in the lore of Star Trek. He was genetically modified, and for lack of a better term, he was genetically engineered to be a physical specimen that everyone should want to be. However, it fucked up with his psychology.
Hey, Jared, now that you mentioned Khan there, we do have an example of a regular, somewhat overweight character, actually. You remember the three other genetically manipulated people or enhanced people that frequent Dr. Bashir?
Well, there was the group of 4 of them. It was just one of them didn't talk. It wasn't that she couldn't, it's that she didn't want to, because that was her role within the group.
But with that, he was overweight there.
Yeah.
So could it be that he's just chosen not to opt into that, knowing that if something happens, he will have medical staff there right away who could solve everything without it being any lasting issues?
That is the thing. It very well could be where it is an elected part of your regular medical care.
Yeah, because looking at things like, you remember when, what was it, the episode where Deanna Troi is trying to get her chocolate sundae, and the replicator mentions that it's calibrated to dietary needs or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still a fucking huge sundae.
Leave it to Troy.
Yeah, but you have things like that. Would it be that, okay, they are, well, in what's it called? In TNG, they're on a very advanced spaceship, or starship rather,
Mm-hmm.
with all manners of senses, with all manners of personal logs, with regular checkups, etc. Would it be impossible that when this hears, oh, that's Deanna Troi again, she wants a sundae, let's just replace all the carbohydrates, etc. in it with this kind of whatever the fuck else that she can't break down. So she can have a huge sundae and it's still only 100 calories.
Or she's given the sundae, she's given the texture, she's given the flavor profile, but there is nothing of substance in there to negatively affect her health. Could be set up that way. It could very well be that too.
Which is somewhat odd if you consider it. Looking at Star Trek, looking at the things that they have banned or just gotten rid of, yet for some reason, chocolate, something that can be a very potent poison to some species, is still unregulated.
Yeah, because at one point they even said that drugs and tobacco and alcohol are no longer a thing, and yet no, just forget that show even exists right now.
What show?
Exactly.
That's something though where I've been trying to figure this out. When they mention that it doesn't exist or that it isn't an issue anymore, is it that they have solved the human problem of having the need for those things to cope? Or is it that they've been going on ban campaigns, that they've been having certain manipulations here and there in order to make the populace less likely to be addicted?
I think it's a bit of both, where you probably did have some form of outlawing, which we already know because, I mean, Romulan ale is not allowed within the Federation except for medicinal purposes.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, you also have, again, with the extreme ease of access to medical care, including psychiatry, what's to stop them from using some sort of inhibitor to pretty much turn off the portions of the brain that do cause addiction?
I'm not so sure that they're actually using inhibitors in that case, though. I would more say that they're actually trying to get to the core issue with it. And we have a quite prevalent example in TNG of this. Broccoli.
Yeah, with his hollow addiction. Rather than medication, it really was actual old school bare bones therapy that actually brought it under control.
Yeah, because looking at the things in Star Trek, say one of the main factors of having an unhealthy childhood and having a generally unhealthy life afterwards is having poor contact or outright toxic or hostile contact with your parents. But if your parents don't have those issues, say that when you grow up, the main issue you had to deal with your parents would be if you happen to get a letter from some captain somewhere named Picard telling you that your mom was stuck halfway through a floor, you wouldn't have the same kind of escapism. You wouldn't have the kind of people who try to go to drugs, try to go to self-harm behavior, try to go into the kind of evil, well, not evil circuits, what's it called? The kind of behaviors which lead them on a downward spiral into just doing more and more.
Yeah, because and that's the thing, and we'll actually be touching on this a bit more on VTW both this week and in the coming shows, where a lot of the way we deal with and interact with the world around us from a mental aspect, from a psychological aspect, there is a heavy side of it that is directly tied to the environment that you grew up in. Your foundational years and what you actually deal with during that time period is so crucial to how you're going to be able to be a part of society when you reach adulthood. And damage can be done that is unseen for decades, but you need to get the help, and oftentimes it's not going to always be a medical option. For everyone that I know of that has an issue in that realm of things, there's always a multi-directional approach to attacking the issue. And oftentimes medication is one of those avenues. The other, those who are on medication, the ones actually progressing in the way that they should and need to, there's also the therapy side. There's the having the counselor or a therapist or a psychologist to talk to and do the sessions to put in the work from a cognitive standpoint instead of just relying on the medication. And you can see, even in a society as advanced as Star Trek, you're still going to have that necessary part of that equation. I mean, not everything can be solved with a gun. Not everything can be solved with technology. Sometimes it comes down to good old human perseverance.
Yeah, but I always thought the whole point of Star Trek was they're above all that. They've surpassed all the needs for kindness, the needs for greed, the need for self, I guess, betterment.
Well, no, they're all about self-betterment. They are all about that quest to improve themselves while also improving humanity because they are a part of humanity. What they've grown past are the primal urges, the violent urges, the less desirable side of humanity, but there are still shadows and hints of it there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like they still will go to war. But it's, to me, it's always been fascinating to me was how they're able to just be so calm. Like in every situation, there's always, they're always like, under some sort of attack. And no matter what the situation is, even though shields are down like 30%, they're like, yeah, we're cool. Like, really? You're that calm? That always got to me. I'm just like, all right.
The comparison.
If you're that zen, then you wouldn't be addicted to pretty much anything.
Well, the comparison I'll put in is situations like that, and you've seen this too. There are people, enlisted and officer, who in a situation, in a very stressful situation, they're actually the most at home. It actually helps them focus and keeps them better attentive when they are not in that overly stressed environment, is when their mind starts to wander and they get in trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
And a good way to think about this is to steal from another movie where they've actually utilized this analogy quite effectively. They're like a duck on water. If you're on the edge of the pond looking out at that duck swimming around, the duck looks like he's just kind of just floating along, not really doing much, just calm as a peach, happy as can be. But if you were to look at that duck from under the water, you'd see those feet going a mile a minute.
You'd see a lot more too, depending on the sex of the duck, but that's a topic for another show.
Big brass balls.
I was more thinking corkscrews.
Wow.
But you have another thing too when it comes to looking at the Starfleet personnel. You do have really huge issues there. You do have really, really psychologically unstable people.
Like who?
Do you remember, what's the name of that woman, Jared? Where they meet a crystal entity. She's trying to...
the doctor, the survivor from Omicron Theta.
Yeah, I can't remember her name right now. This doctor had her son killed in the same incident, which, or on the same planet, which they found data. And she seemed like she was actually dealing with that somewhat fine. She seemed like she was actually getting over the death of her son, and starting to be able to cope with the fact that he is dead. We now have the creature here. We might be able to communicate with it, perhaps even be able to stop more deaths that way in a non-violent manner. And what she did was that when she had the opportunity, she completely obliterated the crystalline entity, despite people trying to stop her. Because she thought that, oh, that would make my son happy. This is something I need to do this for him. I need to get revenge, and I need to make him happy where he is now. Which turned out that no, based on how her son felt, he would not have been happy. He would have been disappointed. He would have been sad that she killed this creature when she had a chance to be able to talk to it, when it wasn't 100% absolutely necessary. And you see these things pop up, especially among admirals or among senior captains. They can have something that sticks with them for years, like having a bias towards, what was it that one time? Was it the Klingons? The captain...
Wait, are you talking the captain of the Rutledge, the one that O'Brien used to serve with?
I think that's the one. The one that kept going after.
It was a few years after, probably about 5 years after the Cardassian wars. By the time we get to that point in Star Trek, and yeah, Captain Maxwell pretty much went vigilante because he had gotten information that the Cardassians were stockpiling weapons again, and took matters into his own hands, and lost his captaincy because of it.
Yep. And we can even look on a very related note to that at O'Brien, who, despite everything, despite being part of the Cardassian Wars and all that, despite having such a great time with the rations, he still was at the point where he could not trust any of the Cardassians. He could not get over his own hatred for them. And I won't say that it wasn't justified, but it's something that was still there, that was still with him. He could not get rid of that. It took a long while until he was actually able to accept the company of at least one Cardassian.
Yeah.
And that took ages.
Yeah, it took probably until midway through DS9 for O'Brien to have less of an issue with Garrick being there. But even then the Dominion War started happening, and the Cardassians joined the Dominion, and for what it's worth, O'Brien actually handled that better than he would have if it happened in TNG.
Yeah, and that's where you see these people most of the time at their best. You see them where they have things under control, or where they're in a situation where they have been drilled, they have been trained in order to react a certain way. And we know that they have, because if they had not, had they not acted that way, they would not have been in the position they are.
Yeah, but when you say, like AT2 was saying, people who perform better under pressure or under severe circumstances, we usually are military trained for the most part. Wouldn't that talk more to the barbaric side rather than the more chill side?
Well, how would someone who's barbaric react under pressure?
Violently, probably.
What would it take for someone who is under pressure to still act rationally, to not put themselves first, or to not put their people first in order to avoid a long-term conflict?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. For us, it's always about the person next to you, regardless. Person to your left or to your right, it's always about them. So if you're trying to protect what you have, yeah, you probably would act more aggressively rather than defensively.
But at the same time, if you act defensively, even if it's something where there's been a misunderstanding, and you do it in the Star Trek universe to the point where they are right there, you defending your fellow crewmates could cause a war that kills billions. You have to weigh that. Will you trying to save your crewmate here be something that is worth the repercussions?
Yeah.
And that's kind of to the
yeah.
Well, and this goes into the storytelling aspect, and one of the better tenets about the majority of Trek offerings that are out there. DS9 actually covered that, where Jadzia and Worf went on a mission to pick up a spy who was supposed to be defecting. Jadzia got injured, and Worf made the choice to pretty much abandon the mission to save Jadzia versus leaving her there, probably to die, and continuing the mission. And because of that, it is said that Worf would never serve higher than his current rank of lieutenant commander because of that. His progression and his potential for command ended with that decision.
I did not know that. Huh. That's interesting. But
yeah,
you know, hindsight's always 20/20. I mean, if that was you in that position, what would you have done?
Oh, it was a hell of a decision. And that is the beauty of Star Trek, is they've never shied away from those sorts of topics, those sorts of decisions. It's always been that really good look and self-reflection throughout these stories. When you look at it, is there's always that moral aspect, especially in Deep Space Nine throughout the Dominion War arc, because you have these people being thrown into some of the worst situations that anyone could ever be put into, because it is warfare. It is the worst types of situations that someone could deal with. And you have people making decisions that, admittedly, they would never even consider otherwise. You have another episode that's centered around Sisko and Garrick, and the manipulations that happened both ways about with the ultimate goal, which succeeded, to bring the Romulans actively into the war on the side of the Federation and Klingons. And as Garrick so eloquently put it, and all it cost was the life of one Romulan senator and the dignity of one Starfleet officer.
Yeah. It's funny how it works out that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's to weigh one, like, say for example, there's a movie I'm thinking of. It's called Swordfish, where they're on a bus. And he says, if you kill this kid in cold blood, you would save the lives of 1 million people. Could you do it?
Ooh.
I don't know if I could.
Yeah, I don't know if I could either.
What guarantee do you have that they are telling the truth?
That's my hesitation.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to have, okay, this kid has within him a transmitter, which is linked to this antenna here, which if he stays here for 2 more minutes on top of this huge tower, he will cause a nuclear detonation, which will level out an entire city. You can see that he has a detonator. You can actually see that this kid is linked with the bomb, do you take the kid and just go yeet, throwing him out of the or off the edge there, killing him, but also getting him far away from the receiver in order to make the bomb useless?
Yeah.
Or do you just let him stay there?
That is the question. I mean, are you fast enough to do that without it going off? Yeah, I mean, weighing the lives of one against the many is never an easy choice to make.
It is. It's difficult depending on the framing because, like, it actually goes back to that. Oh God, I don't know how many years this image has been going around the internet, but you have the train coming to the split.
Mm-hmm.
One side has a row of people tied to the tracks, the other side has one, and you're the person at the switch that determines the direction the train's going to go. What do? Do you let the train continue on and run over 5 people, or do you sacrifice the one? And if you pick the one, that one person you're giving up is someone that you know personally. The other 5, you don't. There are so many nuances to that conundrum that end up factoring in from a psychological standpoint.
It's an easy one to make. It's just the one. It's regardless of who it is, whether it's your brother, your mother, your father, it's gonna be the one.
Say it's your wife.
Even if it's your wife.
That might be a poor example in some cases, though.
Well, it's a visual representation of the problem. Is do you sacrifice one for the many? And
well, that's the thing. That's the whole point of this. You can possibly deal with the loss of one, but can you really handle the loss of many that you could have prevented because you were selfish and decided, I love my wife, I'm going to keep her, but all of them, fuck them.
Well, so here's the thing, and this is where I go into the psychological side of it, and this is the play. It's one person that is dear to you versus any number of people that have no connection to you. And where does that personal connection to the one factor in? And that's where a lot of people hesitate, is because, well, this is this person who's dear to my life versus this many people that I don't know who, let's face it, are going to die anyways. It's just a question of when.
But then you also...
It's a simple... It's just, I mean, I can't... There is no response that could make the killing of many worth it than to, let that one person live. I mean, for me, no matter who it is, my brother, my sister, whatever, sibling, it's got to be that person to save the many. You don't need to know them. It's just because you'd be living with the deaths of that many people for the rest of your life, knowing that you were the selfish cunt that let them all die.
But at the same time, there are people out there who literally have the thought process of, they're going to die anyways, whether I do something or not.
You can't think like that.
There are people that do. And this is why it ends up being that the way you respond and evaluate the situation speaks to the person's psychology, because you have people who can be that callous, who can be that selfish.
Wow. I hate to be that person.
You can also factor in, though, you have one person that you know, one person that you can vouch for this actually being a person who is, say, a good person. Let's not take any of the somewhat slightly rotten examples of family members that we wouldn't really want to hang around. But let's say that this is someone that you know really well. This is someone that you know that this person is a really good person overall. Whereas you do not know any of the other 5. For all you know, these 5 people could have been any kind of, let's put it lightly, trash. The kinds of people who will, for example, go to church, and when going to church, trying to also hook up with little children there. I won't call them priests, but it comes close. But where you have the kinds of people who you do not know them, they could be the best kinds of people you've ever met. But they could also be complete and utter assholes. For all you know, they could die of a heart attack of someone or seeing someone else getting run over by a train. And that's something that you kind of have to factor in too.
But why is the question?
Because if I save these 5 people...
It's still 5, 10... Say it's 5 million people. And against the 1 or the 2. Would you still sit there and say, well, those millions of people are still going to die anyways, but I'm going to save my wife and my son because that's who they are?
And they would really do that.
There are people out there that would make that decision.
But there we also come to, do I have a guarantee that the death of my wife and son would guarantee that these 5 million people live?
Yeah, it's a gamble. I mean, nothing in life is guaranteed.
Yeah. And again, this is where these are the sorts of evaluations and issues that come up and have been addressed in Trek. It's part of the beauty of the franchises. You can have these decisions that come up. You can have these opportunities that address and touch on these sorts of questions to the point where even in Nemesis, arguably the worst way to end a movie franchise, they still even had the line in there from Picard, which showed that the character learned from a prior episode in the series. How many does it take, Admiral? 500? 1,000? 5,000? How many people does it take for it to be wrong? And that is where these sorts of discussions really get to be fascinating and telling of the people who are evaluating it to make a decision of their own in it, because it shows how do they compare and weigh the difference between individuals or differing bodies and numbers of people. Because that admiral was willing to sacrifice a couple hundred Baku under the guise of it being beneficial to the entirety of the Federation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, either way, it's a no-win. It's the, I guess it would be the lesser of the two evils. I mean, for me, it's an easy decision to make. I mean, yeah, it would suck, it would hurt, but ultimately, the more people you can save, the better.
Yeah, and that's where
you can't make a decision based on emotion. Once you put emotion into it,
that's
you're
what
making the wrong
muddies the
decision.
water. Yep.
I would say that that's not entirely the or the same or the right course of action, either the correct course of action. Have you watched The Mist?
Yes.
The one with Thomas Jane?
Yeah.
Do you remember the ending of that movie?
Yes.
Do you remember the reasoning for their actions in the car?
No. I remember they wanted to leave pretty bad.
So they were hopeless. They were at the end.
No.
They thought they were at the point that they couldn't go any further, that everything that they had dealt with up to that point was what their further existence was going to be for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
And to that effect, in order to not suffer, in order to not get to a point where they were, well, both suffering mentally and physically, they decided that the best thing, the most humane thing, would be to make sure that no one in the car survived.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with the kid.
Yep, I remember that.
And that's one of those things. What guarantee do you have? They had no guarantee, but the way that they saw it, they had an absolute. Either we do this now, or we keep on living. We might survive a couple of hours. We might survive a couple of weeks. We might even survive the rest of our natural lives. But we will be in literal hell when we do it.
My takeaway from that was they chose the way they went. They decided not to be torn to pieces by whatever was out there in the mist. They took their own lives.
Yeah, but what happened?
Yeah, in the end, they got saved. But yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate, but they came to peace. You know, they thought they can do. They thought they did all they can do up until that point. They had no more options left. So at that point, was it the right decision? No, but again, hindsight's 20/20. So I don't know.
But seeing this, what you get here is you get the option. You get an illusion of having a choice in it. Let me take this again. You have a random kid. You kill this kid, or 1 million people die.
Yep.
That's the choice you're facing.
Yeah.
Do you know that these 1 million people will die? Do you know that they won't just kill them anyway, even if you kill the kid? At what point can you make a decision where you say, okay, where's that kid? Where's the gun? I'll do it. And you do it right away out of a numbers game made on an unfinished premise.
Yeah, I mean, oof.
Because at the same time, for all we know, the rail track analogy, the conundrum there, could also be that this train track is a cul-de-sac. It comes back. So no matter who you choose, the train will come back. Yeah. And that's where, if you have an absolute, if you have a choice where you know that if this person dies, these people will be saved. That is where you can make, I would say at least, a proper judgment on it. Otherwise, if you get faced with that kind of conundrum, you need to find out more. You need to find out the entire premise before you make a rash decision. Otherwise, you will have shot this kid for no other reason than someone telling you that if you did not do it, they would kill more people.
Yeah. But if you didn't have the time to get more information, if you had only seconds to make the decision, what would you do?
It depends in that case. Would it be something where I get this warning?
Well, my instinctual answer to that one, the person putting this decision to me, are they themselves in sight?
Yes.
There's your target.
But what if doing that kills everybody?
That's the risk you take.
Oof.
Yeah, because no matter what, if you're faced with this decision, And the way that you're faced with it is by someone writing in poop on an old pizza carton, if you know kill kid, will kill people. If you get that, I'm going to say that I don't care if I have 2 seconds. I don't care if I have an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to take that seriously.
True. I don't suspect anybody would.
You would be surprised.
Really?
Yeah. There's a lot of people who make decisions based on improper premises, improper conundrums, improper issues put forward to them. Because they feel like...
Case in point, have you taken a look at the U.S. election?
Yeah, and what you have is...
Yeah, we don't talk about that. That was a shit show. Fuck,
But that's the thing. You have... Not everyone is as capable or cogent of a decision maker as we would like them to be.
And that's very scary.
Let's take another example that happened this Wednesday. Of people being given a choice, a clear choice between 2 alternatives, where one alternative would be a clear winner if people were cogent, if people actually completely and fully listened and read what was said.
Okay, let's pull back the veil here for a bit. So, since we're coming up on the end, we can end on this point, and it is rather apt. So, for those who may have forgotten or aren't aware, on the Discord server, Wednesday nights, we watch a movie or two that is most often put up to a community vote for everyone to actually pick 1, 2, or 3 of the options that they're given. For this past week, there were 2 options given. Shaolin Soccer and Kung Fu Hustle, or watching paint dry.
Those are your options?
Those were the options for this past Wednesday.
Kung Fu Soccer is pretty good. I enjoyed that one.
People voted for watching paint dry because they thought it was a joke and we wouldn't actually do it.
And they were told in no uncertain terms that it was serious. That if they did not want to watch paint dry for 4 hours, they would have to vote something else than for that.
Yes, they would have to go correct their vote. They were given opportunity. We gave them, 6 hours?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
And people still didn't.
Oh my God. I've lost all faith in humanity.
And this is where, if you get given just a simple question, where one option should be fucking obvious, do not expect people to actually see that as being the obvious one. People are far less able to make the kinds of decision based on the information they get to be able to do that properly.
It's sad but true.
Kind of brings a new light onto it.
Yeah.
It makes me... I have to quote one person here now. What you going to do? Stab me? From Man Who Got Stabbed.
Well, with that, I have loved the way this conversation has gone, but we are at the end, and as stated, we have a lot of shenanigans and fun going on the Discord server. So if you're not there, go ahead and join it. Go ahead and join in the fun festivities that are coming up, because we know we have quite the wonderful family events coming up over the next few days and weeks, and a few weeks after that. So if you
All
want
right.
a little bastion away from that insanity, where we'll accept you for what you are, how you are, and make fun of you just as much as we make fun of ourselves, you'll find that in the
Brilliant.
Discord server.
Sweet.
Never a
As long
doubt.
as you stay honest.
Yes.
Oh man, this has been a lot of fun though. I enjoyed this thoroughly.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys having me on. That was awesome.
Yeah,
I
not a
think we
problem.
could do it again sometime.
So with that, we are going to call it a night on this. Stick around, because in about a half hour, we'll be going live again for Veterans Talk Weekly, where we have a special guest joining the panel this week because of the topics that are coming up. So stay tuned and see who joins us. And until then, if you decide to watch that later and have other things that you want to go do with your Saturday night, enjoy, be safe, and we will see you next time.
Laters all. Take care. Stay safe.